that was on her knees. And you talk about, like, we only know the history of that Bloody Sunday. We don't talk about there were different layers of different protesters going on. Can you give us an outline? Because in your story, you outline that before the Bloody Sunday happened, and before this 14-year-old girl that was kneeling in a peaceful protest was grabbed up by the collar of her coat and was brutally beaten. And that's the reason why we say 35 stitches, because that's how many stitches she got upside her head, a 14-year-old girl. And people, what I want to do, and the reason why I'm saying it the way I'm saying it, no matter how you vote today, I'm asking you to vote. Because even if you don't vote, you have already voted and you have no control over where your vote goes.
Hello, my name is Linda Blackman Lowry, and I often start my story with before my 15th birthday, I had been jailed 9 times, twice in a state prison camp here in Selma, Alabama, Dallas County, and you're looking at a happy and proud jailbird. Why? Because I didn't go to jail for hurting anyone, didn't go to jail for taking anything from anyone. I went to jail for what I believed. Now you might ask, what could a 14-year-old believe in so much she would go to jail like that? We were attempting to march from Selma to Montgomery to let then Governor Wallace know. We were protesting the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson, who had been shot. We were all mourning the death of this young man who had given his life to us for the right to vote. But when we got to the apex of that bridge that day and could look over on the other side, all you saw was rows and rows of Alabama state troopers dressed in their blue uniforms, stretched across the 4 lanes of highway. I was in the 19th row from the front. We were being led by the late Congressman John Lewis and Hosea Williams, Mr. Albert Turner from Marion. When John and Hosea got down to the line of state troopers and asked permission to pass, we were told, in essence, we were an illegal assembly. There would be no marching from Selma to Montgomery this day. We had 2 to 3 minutes to disperse and go back to our homes or churches. One of our trainers from SCLC, James Webb, was walking up and down the line, and he was saying, "Kneel, kneel." And there had been times, a couple of times, where we were marching, stopped by the police. They didn't arrest us. We knelt, said a prayer, got up, turned around, regrouped, went back to the church to regroup. So by Jimmy saying kneel, that was something we had done and knew to do. I felt someone grab me in the back of my collar, trying to pull me out of this kneeling position. And I was resisting, so this person reached over me and grabbed me by the front of my lapels and jerked me back into him. Big mistake, because his hand came up by the only part of me that wasn't nonviolent, my mouth, and I bit him. Then I heard the word nigger twice, and he hit me in my forehead twice. He then pushed me away and I was able to get up and start running. And I was running into this cloud of tear gas. Um, I was 14 years old. I wasn't a threat to anybody. I received 35 stitches that day, 7 in my forehead and 28 in the back of my head. I still carry those physical and mental scars some 60 years later. I get very angry, but, and I can't, I refuse to repeat the words I repeat to people around here now when they tell me they are not voting, because they are not very nice words. But I say to everyone, if you don't want to go vote for yourself and your household, then vote for the 35 stitches of a 14-year-old that got you that right. Give that respect.
Welcome to another edition of Talking with Kevin and Son, featuring people you should know. Hi, my name is Kevin McLemore. I am your show host, four-time published author, speaker, and mindset messenger. That's what my friends call me. This episode is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. You know, through the power of our voice, our mission is to uplift the power of all of our voices, inspire, share stories and experience and perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is very simple. We want to create hope, helping other people every single day. Now, let me say this. Whatever your objective is, successful people create a framework around their day-to-day lives that not only enhances theirs, but many times they pour into others. However, today's show is a high call to action and a story that needs to be told, and it should never, and I'll repeat it like you didn't hear it the first time, should never be forgotten. This episode will explore just how critical it is not to be complacent with sitting around at home and not casting your vote today. We are only in the twilight hours of our next election. All right. And this will probably play on for the next couple of years. And this will be repeated. We'll again be sitting in the same position. So your words are just words until a 14-year-old utters the words 35 stitches. Together, this will become a guide to improve your life, or it will be the first brick tossed through your child's bedroom window that will destroy life. 35 Stitches, a voting rights story, goes far beyond the 14-year-old girl and how she survived the brutality that she endured March 7th, 1965, while on her knees in a peaceful protest for the right for all of us to vote. Along with 35 Stitches she received fighting a peaceful fight for our civil rights. This episode will cover her story and the ties that bind, and how her story should be tied to yours. Today's guest, she's a masterful storyteller. Named one of the top 50 women leaders in Connecticut in 2024. Top 25 Outstanding Leadership Impact Awards she's received. She's one of the most influential executives in diversity and inclusion, a member of Fairfield County chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and now screenwriter, executive producer of the documentary 35 Stitches, and soon to be released. I forget the name of the title. She'll correct me. I forgot to write that in there. Anyway, We're talking about the story of the right to vote. I hope this film will allow you to honor the contributions of those stories that are featured in this film. I hope it will motivate you to exercise your right of passage to vote for humanity, not for the stakes in our past, but for the future. So let me welcome to the show registered voter, social activist, change maker, humanitarian, storyteller, thought leader, a good friend of a friend, and the wife of my one of my close friends, Miss Sheryl Battles. Welcome to Talking with Kevin and Son. How you doing?
I'm great, Kevin. With a introduction like that, I just want to say thank you very much, and then I think we're done.
You know something? Our work is only beginning right now because right now anxiety has hit a critical mass in this continent of the United States, um, and we're looking for change. We have witnessed the very best of democracy and the very worst. Depends on perception or interpretation. We have been misled. My family outright said so. We've been lied to. We have tried scare tactics, and in some places, in one of the 50 states or many of the 50 states, depends on how your brushstroke colors the states. It's working. We have ignored the fact that democracy is part of our history and that fascism will soon become part of our history if we do not exercise our right to vote. So I'm going to share something with you, and your husband probably knows this, Mr. Curtis Battles, and I want to say thank you for allowing me to have a couple minutes of your wife's attention. Each morning since my concussion, I always write down the first thoughts that come to my head. And so when I say that Black people have no stake in the past, only in the future, what do you hear when I say that?
I hear pain, um, with what's going on currently, and I hear unspoken pain of what's happened in the past. But the reality is, we have to own our story, because in our story, even in the pain of our story, that's where our healing actually lies. We have a great stake in today, and we have a great stake in tomorrow. And we need to be very cognizant of our history because it gives us examples of how we've persevered. It helps us understand better where we are now and where we want to go. So it's important to remember our history, which is really kind of how this project came about, because I think it's critical not only to our today, but to our tomorrow.
All right, I'm going to ask about 35 stitches, but and that was well put, the way you explained it, because I know I agree. I grew up in a family which my mother participated. Sorry about that. Where my mother participated, and that's another thing. When you have a podcast, turn off your phone. All right, and I should have turned mine off. My mother participated in the civil rights movement. In telling this story, we'll talk about the 14-year-old that survived brutality. I mentioned that in the top of the show. But in this upcoming election, there's a conversation that we are having right now that in 8 or 9 days, the freedom for me to be able to express openly through a podcast may become an illegal conversation. We have revived without saying um, fascism. We have rewritten the Bible. We will soon have authors that stories will never ever get a chance to be told. We will soon, it will soon be illegal to teach the history of melanated people, affirmative action will become a fable. And women's reproductive rights has already ended. So our children growing up today may have no rights. And follow that to an end. Any rights that the LGBTQ plus community have right now will all disappear. What do you say when you hear me say this?
It's a dark um, and troubling time, certainly. Um, but evil or injustice has been present at all times during history. And what you saw were good people who still stood up and did what they did and said what they said, despite all that was standing up against them, despite all that wanted to limit or eliminate or constrain their voice, despite all of the obstacles, they still stood. And so it is with resolve, I think, that people will still stand and will still lift their voices for the rights and the opportunities to do everything that you've talked about. We have seen a regression in access and in opportunities and movements to try to limit our voices and again our history. But on the other hand, we are seeing people saying, nope, we're not going back. We are invested in continuing to speak and continuing to move forward.
And you know something, Cheryl, do you mind? I'm a Southern boy. And in order to call somebody by their first name, I had to ask permission instead of calling you Mrs. Battles. Do you mind if I call you Cheryl?
Please call me Cheryl.
All
And
right,
thank you for asking.
no problem. So before I go on to the next question or talk about why it was important to make not only 35 Stitches, um, or the documentary that'll be a full documentary, Pieces of the Puzzle. Now I remember it. What I'd like to do is take a couple minutes and we're going to pause for a little bit. And I want to run the clip, the 35 Stitches, and we'll talk about the 35 Stitches when we come back. Give me 5 seconds. We're going to run the clip now. All right, Cheryl. Um, I'm going to tell you, and I have to be honest with you, is that I know my mother shares stories with me about her activity in the civil rights movement. I have shaken the hand of one of two survivors of the Tuskegee Airmen. So I have shook the hand of history. I have also, during a speech for Martin Luther King's Day, has hugged, and my heart has connected with another heart of another lady that survived that brutal day in March 1965 at the George Pettus Bridge. And so my heart was connected to history. But I must tell you, when I watched 35 Stitches, even though I saw a strong Black woman, I had to cry. And the reason why I brought tears to my eyes is because I have young children that I thought, and that's the reason why I came up with a quote, about the past. And we need to focus on the future. But we can't go forward in the past without acknowledging that the future existed. Tell me a little bit about, or tell our audience about 35 Stitches and why it was important to make that documentary. And then we're going to fade right into talking about the pieces of the puzzle, the full documentary.
Yeah, that clip, and as you said, it brought tears to your eyes seeing it, it brought tears. I'm the interviewer off camera, if you will. It brought tears to my eyes, and it brought tears to her eyes, remembering it. Um, she grew up, courageous woman. Linda grew up in Selma, and she represented, and I guess that's part of the broader story that we've ended up telling. She, to me, represented two things that Dr. King really shaped his ministry as well as his work in the civil rights movement. This concept that we're all in this together, where our fate is inextricably bound one to another. And then number two, as a result of that, if you're not doing well, if you're suffering injustice, if you're being mistreated, then I am compelled to do something about it. And so, in talking to her about how she was compelled, and it really started for her when she was younger, even younger than 14, if you will. But she was compelled to raise her voice, to gain rights, not only for herself, but for others around her. So her story is important because often we hear about the big names. What we don't necessarily hear about are the regular people like me and you, Kevin, who did something, who didn't just sit idly or silently by, but who actually saw injustice and did something to raise their voices or take some action in support of justice for themselves and or for others.
It's amazing when we have conversations, and my world is multicultural. Okay, you name it. As Jesse Jackson created the Rainbow Coalition, I am take two of the Rainbow Coalition, and everyone says don't get involved in the mess, the muck, and I looked at the fact that I said if someone didn't get involved in the muck, I would not have this show. I would not have graduated from a historically Black college, Central State University. I would not have been a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. I would not have coached, trained, or mentored multiple individuals that attend college, that are in pro sports, that are educators. I would not have had that if it hadn't been for the fact that I had freedom, the freedom, and the freedom is in jeopardy when you watch the clip of a 14-year-old girl that was on her knees, and you talk about, like, we only know the history of the bloody Sunday. We don't talk about there were different layers of different protests going on. Can you give us an outline? Because in your story, you outline that before the bloody Sunday happened, and before this 14-year-old girl that was kneeling in a peaceful protest was grabbed up by the collar of her coat and was brutally beaten. And that's the reason why we say 35 stitches, because that's how many stitches she got upside her head, a 14-year-old girl. And people, what I want to do, and the reason why I'm saying it the way I'm saying it, no matter how you vote today, I'm asking you to vote. Because even if you don't vote, you have already voted and you have no control over where your vote goes. So either you support someone that will deny the right of your daughter, your aunt, your mother, your grandmother, her freedom or her civil rights. You allow a system to incarcerate your uncle, your nephew, your father, and maybe even yourself at a much higher rate for a longer sentence on things that other cultures will get a pass on, or you'll end up on national media as a victim of a random, unjustified shooting just because of the color of your skin or your sexuality or however you identify yourself. I'm not trying to scare you. What I am saying is the reality of the truth. It will be decided on your next level of reality 8 days from now, or even 4 years from now, to see the next presidential candidate. So I say this right now, and my grandfather said this, it's very important. He said, education is not designed to make you comfortable, it's designed to make you think. And the reason why I prefaced what I just said was to make you think. Now, you have an extended version that you're about to release. It's called Pieces of a Puzzle. It features, and I'm going to ask you to outline the story because you told me about a rabbi that was in there. Pastor Anthony Bennett, Joanne Blackman Van, a civil rights activist, Reverend Joseph Ellwanger, Lutheran pastor and civil rights activist, Linda um, Blackman. She's the youngest person, and she's featured in 35 stitches, and she's probably the youngest person that I know of that was part of the voting, that situation with the Voting Rights Act. Honorable AWL Monolith. He's a judge, lawyer, and a contributor to the Civil Rights Act. And then we talk about Rabbi Phillips, which I'm going to start with Rabbi Phillips because you got a grant in order to do this movie. Let's talk about the whole process of how each of these movies came about and how you got tied into it.
That's a powerful statement, Kevin, and you packed a lot into it. And I would just start by saying, if we go back to those, what I believe are core concepts in Dr. King's work and ministry, we're all in this together, and I'm compelled to do something. Dr. King had a lot of quotes about the appalling silence of good people, and how there are people who recognize the urgency of the moment and sense the need for powerful action. What ties those 7 people together is that they did these 2 things. They recognized we were all in it together, and they sensed the urgency of the moment and the need to do something. And as you mentioned earlier, they were actually multi-faith, multi-ethnic / racial, living in different places, and in their own space, right where they were, they did something. So the opportunity came, I've been telling people it's a God thing, in that through the church that my husband Kurt and I attend, the church offers grants for projects, and they're micro grants for projects dealing with injustice, or strengthening the community, or education. And someone in the church actually applied for one of those grants and came up to me and said, "Hey, I got a grant, and what I want to do is capture on film the life story of this Rabbi Phil Schechter, who came to our church on a regular basis to teach classes about kind of the shared history, if you will, of Christianity and Judaism, to teach Hebrew, to do a whole bunch of kind of things to help us understand each other better. And it turns out that Rabbi Phil had been involved in the civil rights movement, and he's 93 years old. And so there was a desire to get his life story on film as an educational tool. So this whole project started out as an educational tool to preserve that history. And so, as you were talking about, Kevin, we could learn from it and lean into it and draw important lessons, lessons that we need for today. So, without talking too much about the multiple stories that we hope you will watch our educational film to learn about. Certainly, Rabbi Phil had a very interesting history of being involved in the last march. There were actually four marches from the Edmund Pettus Bridge. There was one on Saturday, March 6th, that was actually led by Reverend Joseph Ellwanger. There was what we know as Bloody Sunday on March 7th, in which our documentary captures several voices talking about what happened on that dark day. There was a march called Turnaround Tuesday on what would have been March 9th. And that's the march that was portrayed in the movie Selma, in which Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King participated. He did not participate in March 6th or March 7th, but he was there on March 9th. And it's called Turnaround Tuesday because literally they marched to a point on the bridge, knelt, prayed, and then turned around, which is actually what the normal practice was. And generally, it had not resulted in the kind of violence that it did on Bloody Sunday, which is why many who marched on Bloody Sunday were taken by surprise, including Linda, who was 14, and her younger sister Joanne, who was 11. And then there was the ultimate march that where there was supervised by the federal government with protection from March 21st through the 25th. And that was a march that attracted tens of thousands because people had seen the violence of Bloody Sunday. And there was a call, and Dr. King put out a call to people of faith in particular. And Rabbi Phil saw that there was a plane being chartered to go down and participate, and he responded to that call. So, and he was also the rabbi in Atlantic City in 1964, where the Democratic National Convention was, and where the Freedom Party from Mississippi was trying to get seated, and Fannie Lou Hamer became the first black person, first black person, and the first black woman to speak at the Democratic National Convention. Rabbi Phil was involved in helping to raise money for and find housing for that Mississippi delegation, and met Dr. King during that point to talk to him about the donations that they had raised. So repeatedly in this time period, he did multiple things to do something about the injustices that he saw. And he wasn't alone in terms of there being countless other people whose names you don't know who did the same thing. And that's really what the movie's about.
Days from now, as we record this, and this will probably play again 4 years from now when we're back in the same situation. And I hope it's a better situation moving forward. Um, Part of your resume, which is very impressive, and I kind of skimmed through it in order for time, but part of it is DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. You're a strategist. You have a degree in it. I look at the fact that I've never seen independent, Republican, Democrat, or whatever, a candidate call a woman in public and get it recorded by media out of her name, question her heritage, question her education, question her citizenship, question her as an individual, and question her intent. I've never seen so many lies publicly being displayed. I was in a room with a group of young women, and they asked what was important for a candidate to them, and they said integrity, character, and the truth. Those were the things that were important to them. And then the question again says, ask, where do you get your information from? Young people, social media. And when it was explained to them, every social media company has their own bias. And so they're skewed based on where their profits are coming from. But when I hear a young lady say she cannot vote, and this is both Democrat and Republican, for a female, the first thing I said, I don't understand you. You don't know your history. There's been a generation, for some reason, that has not sat down with old heads like ourselves. And I apologize for saying it that way, but that's the way it's said it in my neighborhood, that there's a disconnect of the stories. And I will say to you is that democracy, every single politician from yesterday to today has battled, has exercised their right to solicit, to promise Black female leaders, Black female leaders in our community in order to get their support. And I will tell you, throughout our history, the reason why we have the history and the rights to vote and the rights that we have right now, our education system, is because of women. What will you tell this generation of first time voters? And I want you to talk to the young women, just how powerful their vote is, and just how powerful their vote is, or how it's lost if they do not vote. And remember, I said education is not designed to make you comfortable, but I know what it's like to lose a loved one in the Civil War. I know what it's like to have a brick thrown through the glass of my home. I know what it's like to have a family member shot at because of the color of his skin, and my mother's involvement in Action Incorporated supporting the civil rights movement. So I know firsthand the sacrifice, and there's been many lives that have been lost for us to have this right. But when you speak to the young people, is how do we get that message across, no matter which way that they lean or where they're getting their education? How do we get them to look at this film, 35 Stitches, or look at the pieces of the puzzle and understand the message we're giving them about your right to vote? How do we speak to them?
It's a great question, Kevin, and it's a really serious one. One of our featured subjects in the movie, Reverend Bennett, talked about the tension of today is because we don't tell the story and we don't connect the story. And so when you don't fully understand, I think people often hear, we made sacrifices to be where you are today, no matter where it is. And as you outlined, all the rights and freedoms that you have, there were sacrifices made to do that. And I think sometimes without having heard the stories behind it, and realized the real pain and sacrifice that went into it, that becomes a cliche, right? And that's why, Linda's story and the story of so many others whose names and stories we don't even know. No, this was real blood and pain and tears. This was real, um, standing up and speaking out, without regard for their own personal safety, or health. This was sacrificial, in the way that they believed so strongly in the injustice that was happening and in the promise of the freedom. And the reason they chose voting, because then voting touches literally every aspect of your life. And you've talked about it before, Kevin, whether it's your reproductive rights, whether it's what your children get taught in school, whether it's your health and safety, whether it's the way the justice system works, whether it's access to health care, you name any aspect, the air you breathe, the water you drink, the quality of the food that you have access to, it's all determined through the vote by people who are elected or appointed to be over those areas of your life, every single area. And so when you think about your life holistically, even if you don't think it matters to you, think about those that you love. Think about your children, that if you willingly choose not to have a voice in the people who are deciding such critical issues, then you're stepping away from your responsibility. Dr. King said, my favorite quote of his is, the ultimate measure of a man, and I would say a person, is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. These are challenging times. And by casting your vote, you are actually raising your voice to say, enough. I'm going to elect someone, and not just elect them on either early voting, which I would encourage, or on November 5th. It's not just when you go to the ballot box, but then it's holding those elected officials accountable. And it's as much who we have in the White House as you have in your local courthouse. You have to vote for all offices, and you have to be engaged and hold them accountable for doing what needs to be done relative to your interest, whether relative to your family, relative to what will get you access and opportunity for a better life.
Boy, I hate to pick up the mic after you just dropped it and so eloquently spoken. Um, these are all very important issues. We have two candidates in 2024 that are running for the highest seat in the United States of America on our federal system. Coretta Scott King told Byron Allen when he started his media group, he said, what is my responsibility in starting this company? And if I misquote this, this is the way that I interpret it. She said, just tell them the truth. I think, in my opinion, if I had to say, I had to do this whole political process over, and D.L. Hughley said this, he says, our original Constitution was written by rich white men. Um, with good intentions to bring people together. It's the reason why we talk about we the people. And he says, right now, the reason why we're at where we're at present day, and the reason why the game is being played the way it's being played is because of rich white men. So says D.L. Hughley. And I will put my neck out there and says I don't disagree. Simon Sinek says, someone I admire, I listen to. He said, if women were running this country and these corporations, he said we would have better health care, we would have better work environments, we would have peace on the streets. He said the system would be ran much better if women were at the helm. We have one candidate that has a concept. We have one candidate that's been vice president and is being held accountable for supporting the president of the United States. But she has a plan. If you were to say, after each one of these people have watched your film, what message would you give to our Republican candidate in telling this story? And what advice would you give? And asking the same question, the first potential female president, multiracial female president of the United States, from 35 stitches to pieces of the puzzle, what would you tell them when creating the story for either one of them going forward?
The candidates or
The
the
candidates.
Hmm, that's a very interesting question. I think a couple things. One, none of us voters can afford to be single issue voters. In other words, my life and the quality of my life is made up of multiple things, from my safety, my sense of self and ability to be respected and live peacefully, my education, my economic opportunities, my access to health care, my ability to create and generate wealth, not only for me, but for subsequent generations, my education, etc. So my life is multi-layered. So I would say to the candidates that they need to ask themselves what they are prepared to do for the whole self, not just one issue, not just one sound bite, but for the whole quality of life for each individual voters, so that all people can have access to healthcare, education, to live peaceably, to be respected, treated with dignity and respect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What are they doing for the whole person? Because it's not one issue, it's everything. It's how you approach creating that kind of safe, welcoming environment where people can grow and prosper and really help this country grow and prosper. And I think each candidate needs to think about what is your plan? How are you going to make that possible for each and every American?
That is very well put. Um, I've said this once or twice before. You may not be able to control the events of your life, but you can control not being seduced by them. And that's the message I would say when you hear people tell you that they're going to come into your neighborhoods and rape your daughters and mothers. They're going to take over the neighborhood. Um, when I hear the stories that they're taking jobs from people that look like you, I'm still trying to figure out what a black job looks like. I probably have one, and I think Obama said this best. One candidate is trying to take a black job from another black person. So we'll say that my vote is always cast for the person telling the truth. I wish it was actually illegal for a candidate on any level to be automatically disqualified for lying. I wish that the billions of dollars that are spent in trying to make one candidate look bad were spent trying to improve our infrastructure, our education system, our healthcare, and the quality of life of our children. The diverse of conversation I wish did not exist. This is all a dream. All right. But I honestly wish that candidates today, candidates going forward, would look at you as you spoke um, about our democracy so freely and so eloquently and sit back and not be offended by what they just heard, but sit back and acknowledge the conversation that you're having is real. It affects the things that you said, Blacks, Latino, Jewish, gay, lesbians, however you identify yourself, young, old. People don't look at the fact that the reason why, they want to extend retirement age is because we have a lack of cheap labor out there. They do know that men don't live as long as women do. But we also understand the way that commerce had acted back in the past is that the only way that they can afford to buy another person is to impregnate the person that was already on the property. Free labor. All right. I don't want to live the next 20 years and see history repeat itself. That's personal. I don't know how you feel. And if you don't vote, all right, history will repeat itself because there's many people. And if you've been taught or caught a certain and feel a certain type of way, I hope by watching this interview and listening to you, Sheryl, a person of faith, a person of sacrifice, a person that's been educated, that has exercised their freedom, and a person that's set time and sacrificed time and energy to create a story that needs to be told. I hope in some type of way she touches you at a point that you're open to the new education and make a conscious decision, not based on where you sit right now. It's where the person sitting next to you sits, not knowing what they're going through, but give another person a chance. If you could change anything about the documentary, because I know that you guys are in the final state right now, or anything you can add, is there anything that you missed that you wanted to put into it if you had more time? Because I know the election is the short period of time. All right. Anything that you would change or anything you would add into it?
Well, we actually do have the luxury. Our initial thrust was not voting rights. We were just very curious about what other people did, what other stories were out there that we didn't know. Of people who made really courageous choices to champion civil rights for themselves or for others at pivotal moments in our shared history, right? And we found people doing a range of things in their lives where they were. Um, the only thing I would change is we have so much good footage. We are actually probably looking at perhaps multiple pieces. We know we live in a time in which attention spans are short, and so our real struggle is to kind of make choices in terms of how much of the stories we can share in an amount of time where people will still be engaged and watch it, quite frankly. But you mentioned something earlier about history. After each and every one of these interviews, I thanked the people and said, it's not often that you get a chance to interact with history. I mean, real living history. And because we don't do our storytelling, we don't know how much living history we are surrounded by and interacting with, and the wisdom that can be gleaned from that history. There's this African concept of this bird called I think it's called Sankofa, and apologies to those from the continent if I have mispronounced it. But it's this concept. It shows, when this concept is illustrated, it shows this bird that's flying forward but looking back. And the concept is that there's something in the past that you need to bring with you into the future. And the stories of our struggle, the stories of our sacrifice, and ultimately the stories of how we have persevered and how we have found ways to make a difference no matter where we sat. Those are the things that we need to bring with us in order to go forward into a brighter future.
Can I ask you a small favor? Because you are a writer, and the way that you table this, my mind's always spinning. We need to remember the yellow pages.
Yes.
Are you old enough to remember that? We need a book. We need to go back and do these interviews and create a book. It may be volume one, it may be volume two, maybe volume three, that our young people have access to these stories. Because most of the people, these stories will probably not be here in the next 10 years. Put this together. You're a writer, you're a producer, you're an executive producer. Not only put the book together so it stays within the Library of Congress. And the reason why I'm saying this is that there was a young man I had on my podcast, and he's a spoken word artist. And even though his school banned the books that he had been reading in his school, they didn't ban him from reading the books. And so when he gave his spoken word and he won an award in his eighth grade year, can I ask you to put that book together? Can I put that pressure on you? And I'm telling you, I will help you find people to put those stories together.
Well, I am certainly flattered. I do agree that in that we need to capture these stories. I think they are starting to reside in different places. I think I know when it first opened, I suspect it's still doing so in the Smithsonian Museum of African American culture and history in Washington, D.C. There's a space in the museum. There used to be a space in the museum where you could sit and record your personal history. And so I think they were trying to capture histories in that way. I know that there are other museums that probably also, like the Civil Rights Museum, for example, might have recordings of histories and interviews with people. So I think the stories have been captured in different spaces. I don't know that they've been captured in one place in terms of what ordinary people did. But it certainly is something that, now that we've started looking at it, I would certainly consider.
And I will be more than happy to help. I failed to do this at the top of the hour because we were watching the clip. How do people get in contact with you?
That's a great question. You can certainly email me Uh, and we love to hear from you if you're interested in seeing the documentary once it is completed. My email is my name, Sheryl, Sheryl dot Battles, Battles 22 at gmail.com. We haven't put up an official email for the movie as of yet, since we are still working on it. But once we do, you will, if you send to my email, we'll be able to refer you to the appropriate site or email for the movie.
All right, and then that'll be fine. And I will commit my access to my resource. We will run that on my podcast channel in full with that. So I'll bring you back and we'll run that and we'll share it and we'll distribute it from there. I will also open up the doors to some of my other connections in order to help you get that out there, the same way I did with Dear America, another documentary that I had an opportunity a week or so to interview those people. Um, what do you want to say to America right now before we wrap up?
I just go back to the theme. We are 100% in this together. I can only be as good and free as you are. And so we have this mutual obligation to support and stand up for one another. And we have this tremendous opportunity in the form of our vote, in the form of after the vote being active and going to public hearings, going to school board meetings, showing up and raising our voices so that we can be informed about what's going on, and those who are making those decisions can hear from us, know where we stand, and know that they are accountable to us.
Through that. And with that said, I will say this to our current politicians and our future politicians is that democracy will either thrive in the next couple of days or it will be destroyed. But diplomacy is only going to work if both parties mutually come together to serve the people and not the oligarchy. So, with that said, I'm going to say this to you. To grow, you must make some mistakes. We're okay with that. To have confidence, you must address your anxieties. To forgive yourself, you must hold yourself accountable. Stick to the truth. To learn, you must undo some stuff. To exist, you must show up more today than you did yesterday. And to understand the power of your word in the next elections, in the next few to come, you must exercise your right to vote. This is from me, your mindset messenger. We've covered a lot of information. I don't know if there's anything that I missed, Miss Battles, before. I'm going to stop saying Miss Battles, Cheryl. All right, you're a friend, Curtis. I love you. I appreciate you being the go-between your wife and I, because she's so important. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with?
The clip that you showed is so powerful because it was the courage of conviction of a 14-year-old that put her in the 19th row of 300 rows. She was in row number 19, marching for freedom at 14. That courage that convicted her that she had to stand and do something is something we can never forget. And as she says, and that we can honor by voting for a 14-year-old and her out of respect for a 14-year-old and her 35 stitches.
35 stitches. Think about these words. Acknowledge the story to be true. Be a good human being. I do have to say this, Miss Battles. My original show format was set up for people we should know, the untold stories of people that were doing great things in our community, and you're exceeding expectations. But I've also had a circle of friends that were doing other things, and they shared the secrets to their successful lives. And so I created in the beginning of 2024 a list of people that had secrets to a successful life. I'm not talking about your bank account or, how many degrees or whatever, the people that were giving back and making a difference. I would like to honor you by adding your name to those top 100.
Oh
If you
my,
would accept.
that is quite an honor. Thank you so much.
All right. So one last question before we sign off. In this show, it was never my intent, but I've always said when people are trying to show me how to market my show, how to get likes, comments, or shares, I basically said I'm going to build my business, this podcast, the same way I've built my business in real life, one person at a time, and people that had a high call to action. Little did I know, all of my friends are the type of people, they don't drive by an accident, they stop to help. When I asked this question, I did not expect this response. I've had 6 people today, that 6 total strangers had came by and addressed this question for people and changed 6 people's life that have been guests on my show. If you had one ask, that means if you had one dream that could come true, and that's someone listening to this podcast, and I reach about 10,000 people and growing, and it's going to expand after this. Either people are going to love me or they're going to hate me. And I will tell you either way, I appreciate those that support me and share. And those that hate me, I understand and I pray for you. All right. God bless you. If you had one ask, what would that be?
I think the one ask would be to help us get this story told by showing and sharing the film or the clip, or by encouraging all that you know to be curious and just start researching for themselves about our history and about how we got to where we are. Because I believe there are lessons that can benefit all of us right now by understanding the resilience that has enabled us to come this far.
And I thank you. And I know people are listening because I heard you. And I'm acknowledging what you said to be true. All right. So to my listeners, I'm going to say thank you so much. We've covered a lot of information in this episode. And I hope at some point of what we shared has enlightened you. I'm hoping at some point in this conversation and how we shared it, we have touched you in a way that we have touched your soul. And not only have we touched your soul, we've opened the door for change. If you have not followed us, I would say go to RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page and subscribe and follow or share this episode. If you would like to be a guest or know someone that is doing something dynamic and would like to be on the show, go to www.rmkproductions.org and fill in the information, and we'll be more than happy to get in touch with you. I appreciate you, Sheryl. 1,000 ways. I have a hashtag says find 1,000 ways to be kind to someone, and your kindness and your energy is much appreciated on this show. You're always welcome back. I hope the little seed that I planted and I will be more than happy to help you gather information, help you interview, help you write, edit. I will lend my publishing company to you if we can get these stories. So we won't take all these magnificent experiences, these nuggets, to the life beyond, and allow some of our young people that will turn the page of a book. Because you know what they say in our neighborhood, the best way to keep a secret from anyone is to put it in a book. So we're taking a big risk. And I will say, once you read the book, once you see this documentary, I'm going to say, please don't tell. Okay, you know our people can't keep a secret. So with that said, my grandfather always said, when you get to a point in life that you can help someone, and sure, I appreciate you doing what you do. It is your duty to do so, which you have exercised. He said, reach one, teach one. And believe it or not, inside your documentary, I always thought my grandfather, because this is what he said to me all the time. I heard it repeated in your documentary. He said, reach one, teach one. It is your duty to do so, to help someone else. No matter how successful you are, when you bring on someone else, you change the world. All right. And what I would say in closing, it says, water your own flower and stop dancing in the weeds. So with that said, we'll fade to black and we're out. Thank you, Miss Battles.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate what you do.
All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're out with Fade to Black.